Why is the West losing out to China's competition? And when you ask yourself this question, another question arises. And how did the Western world miss China's rise and recover only when China began to pose a real threat to them? First of all, this happened because of China's cautious and prudent foreign policy, which did not pose a threat to the Western world. In order to explain the essence of this policy, we can cite the foreign policy of the Soviet Union as a completely opposite example. As you know, after the end of the war, relations between the United States and the Soviet Union deteriorated significantly. And later, this deterioration of relations led to political confrontation, the struggle for spheres of influence, and the arms race. That is why this period is called the Cold War. And in fact, this is some kind of strange historical feature of Russian policy, when, having much more modest economic capabilities, they throw all available resources only to demonstrate their military power and force others to reckon with them. And so they did during the Cold War. In order to keep up with the more developed United States, they threw their much smaller resources exclusively into building up military power. And when your potential enemy is demonstrably building up military power, this usually raises concerns about its goals. And of course, this provokes a response that leads to an arms race. At the same time, China's policy was completely opposite. Instead of competing with the West in armaments, China demonstrably focused exclusively on economic development. And it tried to keep its spending on armaments at a level that would not cause concern in Western countries. Even now, when China can afford to create a powerful army, it does not do this. It should be noted separately that when China had certain disputes with the US regarding certain territories, but even then it avoided confrontation. The situation around Taiwan is especially indicative here. Let me just remind you that it is not just an island that China claims. For mainland China, it is a country with a Chinese revolutionary government in exile, which is also called China. Nevertheless, Taiwan is in the sphere of US interests, although they do not officially recognize this country due to a protest from China. However, despite these disputes around Taiwan, China did not try to resolve the issue militarily, and this peaceful policy of China lulled the vigilance of the Western world while China itself was strengthening its economic power. By the way, this phenomenon was even symbolically called the peaceful rise of China. And here we come to our main question. How did it happen that the West began to lose competition to China? First of all, because of the development strategy. China had it, but the West did not. And let me explain more specifically what I mean. In Western countries, there was no state economic policy as such. Instead, the economic situation depended on the decisions of a huge number of different businesses from different industries, which made them in their own commercial interests. While in China, there is a state strategy for economic development which is reflected in 5-year plans and which consists in the development of individual industries and the direction of all state resources to them. And here is the main difference between the Chinese approach and the Western one. China is not interested in such commercial indicators as investment volumes, profitability, payback, and high competition. China simply chooses industries that it considers advisable to develop and then pours money into these industries. Do you understand the difference? In Western countries, industries appear if a business independently wants to invest money in this direction, and only if it succeeds as a result of tough competition. In China, it is completely different. Industries appear at the will of the government. The only problem is that such Chinese methods of pouring money into certain industries do not comply with the rules of fair competition, because this is how Chinese companies get an unfair financial advantage and can only destroy their competitors by dumping prices. And that is why such methods of state support are prohibited by the World Trade Organization. But China is such a large and influential country that they did not care about all these prohibitions. And this is how China is conquering the world. If you are interested in this topic, I can tell you more about China's strategy and also give examples from different industries. Just write in the comments.